Travelers, listen carefully. In 2025, Canada has introduced new rules for U.S. visitors. Some are small paperwork changes, while others can seriously disrupt vacations, business trips, or family visits. Even minor mistakes could lead to denied entry at airports or long delays at land crossings. Stick with this guide until the end, because rule number 1 is the most surprising. It has already caught thousands of Americans off guard and could completely change your travel plans. All sources for this video are listed in the description. Let's begin with rule number 10. Rule 10. Expanded ETA requirements. Starting in 2025, U.S. travelers flying to Canada must complete an electronic travel authorization or ETA online. Previously, a passport was enough, but now travelers must pay a $7 fee and get approval before boarding. Airlines will deny boarding without proof of ETA. Although the application takes only a few minutes, many Americans missed the change. In the first month, over 5,000 travelers were denied boarding. Business travelers connecting through Toronto or Vancouver were especially affected. Canada says the ETA improves security and tracks arrivals. Critics argue it complicates a historically simple border crossing. Ignoring it could end your trip before it even begins. They failed to obtain the ETA in advance. Business travelers connecting through Toronto and Vancouver were among the most affected. Canadian officials insist the process is quick and only takes 5 minutes online. Yet many Americans are still surprised, since for decades crossing the border by plane required no prior clearance at all. This rule signals a shift towards tighter digital monitoring. Ignoring it could mean your trip ends before it even begins. Example: a Chicago traveler connecting through Toronto is denied boarding because he skipped the ETA. Meetings are missed, flights are rescheduled, and plans are disrupted. Okay, so Rule 9 is all about mandatory biometric screening. Canada has really expanded its biometric checks lately. Now, selected United States travelers who get flagged for secondary inspection have to provide fingerprints and facial scans. Officials say this helps prevent fraud and, speeds up verification. But privacy advocates are worried about unnecessary surveillance. If you refuse biometric checks, you might actually be denied entry. In January 2025 alone, more than 12,000 Americans were asked for fingerprints at Canadian airports. Major hubs now have biometric kiosks, so this is becoming a standard thing. Law enforcement groups are praising the system because it's already caught dozens of travelers with fake IDs. For most Americans, it's still pretty rare, but with the expansion, honestly, anyone could be selected. With biometric kiosks now installed in every major airport, it's clear Canada plans to make this a permanent part of its border strategy. Here's a tip: frequent travelers should carry multiple IDs and be ready for biometric screening, just to avoid any surprises. Now, Rule 8 is about stricter vaccination proof. Canada now requires United States travelers to show updated routine vaccines like measles and tetanus, both digital proof and printed CDC. Families with children really need to be cautious, because missing records can actually lead to denied entry. For example, a family from Texas was refused entry because their 6-year-old didn't have proof of measles vaccination. Canada says rising global measles outbreaks are the reason for this rule. So it's a good idea to double-check your medical paperwork before traveling to avoid any complications. Canada argues that the increase in global measles cases justifies the rule, and honestly, it's now one of the strictest vaccine entry requirements in North America. For Americans, this means you really have to double-check your medical paperwork before you leave. It's a detail that could decide whether you spend your vacation in Canada or end up stuck at home. For instance, there was a family that arrived in Vancouver but realized their child's vaccination record was missing, and that delayed their trip by a whole day. So, here's something important about cash declaration updates. U.S. travelers carrying more than $7,000 in cash or its equivalent really have to declare it when they arrive in Canada. Before, the threshold was 10,000 Canadian dollars. If you don't declare, you could face fines, have your money confiscated, or even end up with a travel ban. For instance, there was a Nevada tourist who lost $8,000 at the Windsor crossing just for not declaring it. The Canadian government says this rule is about fighting money laundering and organized crime. If you're heading to Ontario or Quebec to shop or gamble, you should pay extra attention. They've pointed out that undeclared currency can end up fueling organized crime. Thankfully, most travelers don't carry that much cash. Still, this rule has already caused some tension. U.S. visitors going to casinos in Ontario and Quebec are among those most affected. Even just casual tourism can get a bit more complicated now thanks to stricter financial oversight. Here's a practical tip. Always declare any cash amounts that are near or above the threshold. Now about vehicle inspections. U.S. travelers who cross by car should be ready for more thorough checks. Agents might go through your luggage, electronics, and even your glove compartment. And yeah, things like firearms, pepper spray, or knives can definitely get you denied entry. One Michigan driver actually reported a 3-hour inspection at Sarnia after agents detected traces of gunpowder. There weren't any illegal items found, but the whole process was, honestly, pretty exhausting. These inspections apply to everyone, including families just on vacation. Canada says this helps stop smuggling, but it also adds a lot of stress and delays. Like I said, nothing illegal was found, but the process still took more than 3 hours. These deeper checks aren't just for high-risk travelers either. Even families on vacation could go through them. Canadian officials claim these inspections have already stopped several smuggling operations. From a security standpoint, it's a win. But for travelers, it's definitely a headache. Okay, so Rule 5 is all about digital customs pre-declaration. Canada now actually requires digital customs declarations for U.S. travelers at major airports like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. You need to declare your items, food, and currency using a mobile app or an airport kiosk before you land. If you don't declare digitally, you could face fines or honestly, much longer processing times. Back in March 2025, over 20,000 travelers were delayed because of mistakes in the system. But, if you use it properly, you can reduce your wait time by nearly 30%. Travelers really have to adapt quickly. And hey, before we get into the top 4 rules, take just a second to subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification bell if you appreciate clear explanations of travel policies and international updates. Your support actually helps us bring you more content. It only takes 2 seconds, but it makes a huge difference. Here's a quick tip. Familiarize yourself with the app or kiosk before your flight. Now, Rule 4 is all about criminal record restrictions. Even minor past offenses can now prevent entry. Things like DUIs, petty theft, or even decades-old drug convictions may require you to get a temporary resident permit or go through formal criminal rehabilitation before traveling. So, hundreds of Americans have actually been turned away at the border. For example, a traveler from Florida was denied entry because of a decades-old marijuana conviction. Canada really emphasizes safety, but honestly, the rules can feel pretty strict for travelers with old offenses. This is one of the most controversial changes this year. Immigration lawyers in both countries are reporting a sharp rise in applications for waivers. Like I mentioned, one traveler from Florida was denied entry after revealing a decades-old marijuana conviction. Canada insists the policy is consistent, but for many Americans, it just feels like an unforgiving barrier. So just a quick heads up, it's really important to check entry requirements and apply for permits in advance if you have any criminal history. Now about Rule 3, which is all about food and agriculture restrictions. Canada has definitely increased the rules on bringing in food, plants, and animal products. Things like beef, poultry, dairy, packaged snacks, and even pet food might be confiscated if they're not properly documented. Actually, several U.S. families lost hundreds of dollars in groceries at the border in 2025. Canada says these rules are in place to protect livestock and prevent disease outbreaks. For visitors, honestly, it's just safer to leave food at home rather than risk fines or confiscation. Now, moving on to Rule 2, extended stay monitoring. Canada now digitally tracks U.S. visitors' length of stay, and overstaying the 180-day limit can trigger automatic bans. Casual tourists are rarely affected, but snowbirds and long-term visitors must monitor time carefully. One retiree from Arizona was banned for 2 years after overstaying by 1 week. Travelers should maintain records of travel dates and check official logs online. The most surprising change is a climate impact levy. Certain short-haul flights from the United States to Canada now include a $15 carbon offset fee per ticket. Canada says this supports climate commitments. Critics argue it targets travelers instead of airlines. Many visitors were unaware, but environmental groups praise it. Travel agencies warn it fees. Canada's 2025 rules reflect a shift toward stricter security, health, and environmental policies. Even small oversights can disrupt trips. Americans used to easy crossings now need preparation and awareness. Double-check ETAs, vaccination records, customs declarations, and travel dates. Be ready for biometric checks, vehicle inspections, and even climate fees. Thank you for being with us and watching the video. Be sure to like, comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell icon to get new video updates.